Can you explain a little bit the difference between what it is to motivate yourself and what it is to be motivated?
Is there a difference between making a wrong decision and making a mistake?
Are we talking about giving too much power to the team effect?
Is it good, then, to allow yourself to be given the heat to cover tracks for him for the sake of the company? Would that make you a good manager, a good follower?
If we're into increased accountability, how does that translate into being a greater risk taker?
It's hard to talk about trust when you can't get past pay equity.
Courage, accountability, reform. The futuristic workplace will impact all of us. How we prepare ourselves today will determine our success as individuals and as organizations in the 21st century. Think you've got it nailed? Think again. The rules, all the rules, are being rewritten. Think of the acronym CAR. The C stands for courage, the A for accountability, the R for reform. These are the habits needed today for leadership in the business community of tomorrow. Come with me. It's time to rethink, to reinvent, to retool. I'm Bill Byrne, and in my book, Habits of Wealth, I suggest changes you can make today to better prepare yourself for tomorrow. This video is designed to take you further. Together, we'll embark on a provocative journey into the future. We can look back and we can look forward. Most of our discussion today is looking to the futuristic workplace, but looking back for a moment on my life, I feel strongly that there have been certain defining moments, certain times when I've had to reach down into the gearbox of life and shift it and find out how much transmission and how much engine, how much horsepower I had to get up a hill. Those defining moments and how we respond, the decisions we make at those major intersections, at those major junctions of life, whether in our personal life or our professional life, can make all of the difference. It is really critical that we understand the importance of how we react when we're under the gun. I have had many times in my life where it's been punishing. I have had financial challenges. I have had personnel challenges. There have been days I've gone home and I wondered, how, Bill, how could you possibly be so dumb?
What'd you say?
and I tried hard to come home tomorrow night saying, Bill, how could you be so smart?
So if there are wrong answers and right answers, and you talked about these defining moments, so what I'm inferring is that we have like two jobs: to recognize a defining moment when it happens, like not to have it, just go by. But then, okay, so now you go, this is important. Now I've got to make a choice. What can you tell us about what needs to go through our minds when that happens?
How to
push you towards the right decision, the right move.
I believe when people get fouled up, if you will, when they move to the wrong track, it's to a large extent because they confuse success with something that they don't want to be. We have to understand what we want to be as well as what we want to do. And every decision we make, Joe, has to be compatible with our foundational principles and values.
In other words, a personal mission statement? I mean, a personal...
Yes, indeed. We get off the track in our lives as individuals when we make decisions, personally or professionally, that compete and fly in the face of our core principles or values. Success without principle ultimately will lead to suicide. Organizations that have focus and understand their direction and where they want to go and what they want to be, importantly, what they want to be, are organizations that have something in writing that tells them that. Something in writing that tells them that. That's one of the key points. And that needs to be developed throughout the organization and assimilated and understood, and it needs to be the marching orders of that organization and the people in it. And if that plan is there, if it exists, and if it's reviewed periodically and paid attention to, it can overcome many of these obstacles that wouldn't be possible to overcome if that plan or that strategy or that focus wasn't in place.
Respond to your defining moments. Author your personal mission statement. Defend your core principles and values.
One of the answers is workplace reform, and it's upon us. One of those reforms is the enlightened understanding that the human resource, not the financial resource, not the physical resource, but the human resource that's becoming the most important resource to organizations of all types and sizes. That's the good news. The bad news? Each of us is going to have to be more accountable for the way we behave, the way we think, the level of our personal accountability. For the past 2 or 3 decades, America has evolved from an era of earning to an era of deserving. And now we're moving back again, away from the I deserve it mentality and back toward the I must earn it mentality. We're all becoming more accountable for our outcomes and our results. We as individual accountable people, we as members of a team can make a difference. If we are trusted and respected and admired, we can make a difference. Period. I absolutely believe that.
Doesn't increased accountability mean that, you know, if your plan doesn't go, you're gonna get the chop. You're gonna take it in the neck.
Everybody makes mistakes, and we, every doggone one of us now, should try to create an environment within which mistakes are not only tolerated, but sometimes welcomed if they're made for the right reason. What we should not do, however, is be tolerant of a situation or a person who makes the same mistake on a repetitive basis. That's stupidity. And that shows lack of accountability, and for that, they need to pay a price. There needs to be a response. There needs to be a consequence. You know, the best organizations don't fly with level wings. They fly with uneven wings, where the people up here who are getting the job done are recognized for it and are treated differently than the people who are down here and not getting the job done. Does that make sense? Fly your corporate or organizational plane with uneven wings, because as soon as we start to treat everyone the same, everybody's going to start behaving the same. We'll become an organization of mediocrity, where mediocrity is acceptable and that is unacceptable. Create an environment where there's a difference between those who are doing it well and those who are doing it not so well. That's accountability. That's measurement. You have to respect and admire them on that basis as well, and show it.
What if you have somebody in whom you see a lot of potential, and I have somebody like that, and I'm wondering not so much how to specifically motivate them, but how to help them.
I'll tell you what, Steve. I have a habit in Habits of Wealth entitled, "If you have thoroughbreds in your stable, let them run." And I thought when writing that about a college buddy, my college roommate my senior year. Here's a guy that had a terrific marketing mind. It was obvious that he was going to sell something and do it very well, and sure enough, he joined a large computer firm. And he was sent to a relatively underdeveloped territory. He was asked to double the revenues in that territory in 3 years. Well, he didn't double those revenues in 3 years. He almost increased them tenfold. I'm talking 10 times. Now, this is a real story. And he made a big mistake. He made a big mistake. In his 3rd year, he made more than his boss, because he was an achiever. He was a racehorse looking for a racetrack. He was looking for a thoroughbred. He was looking for a place where a thoroughbred could run. And they didn't want to give him that racetrack. So what did they do? You've probably all heard of this before. They offered him a manager's job. They figured, well, it's a good way to give a sales achiever a pay cut, right? Become a manager. What they didn't know is that most sales achievers don't make very good managers. And they also didn't understand the role of empowerment and entrepreneurial thinking. So what did they do? They cut the territory in half. That immediately cut his income 30%. They brought in somebody else to handle the other half of the territory. And what did he do?
Left.
He quit. Within 90 days, Bob. Within 90 days, he quit. And for the past 22 years, my college buddy has been doing to them what he wanted to do for them. He was looking for a racetrack. He was a thoroughbred. He wanted some place to race, some place to try on his ability, and they took it away from him. And that is not what the futuristic workplace is about. The futuristic workplace is all about accountability, but it's also about achievement. Now, one thing is critical here, and that is the thoroughbreds, the racehorses that we seek to empower, that we let run, if you will, that we empower and turn loose and let them go. They have to have the emotional maturity and the personal stability to handle it. Otherwise, they will become addicted to it, and they will begin to offend other people who may not be thoroughbreds, or who have different priorities, or who bring different skills to the business. So they have to have the emotional maturity to run with it in a positive sense. If they don't, they will become a nemesis, and sooner or later, an empowered, enlightened workplace will purge them. As Paul Meyer says, who founded the Success Motivation Institute, who wrote my foreword, he says that successful people are those people who commit to habits of doing things that lesser successful people dislike doing and in fact will not do. Now it's time to check our gut on that. Successful people have habits that others don't have, and they do them when others don't want to. There's a difference. I am saying that in the workplace of tomorrow, there is a knife that is going to differentiate between those types of attitudes and those types of folks.
Recognize the importance of the human resource. Paychecks are earned, not deserved. The best organizations fly with uneven wings. If you have thoroughbreds, let them run. Successful people are mature and accountable.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as someone who manages and organizes a business undertaking, assuming the risk for the sake of profit. A narrow definition at best. But I use the word more broadly. The key word isn't entrepreneurship, that's a task. The key word in the futuristic workplace is entrepreneurial, which refers to a state of mind. Entrepreneurs aren't an elite club composed of gamblers. To be sure, many have achieved great things through aggressive and creative thinking, but few successful achievers are gamblers. Achievers are, however, inclined to take calculated, thoughtful risk. So, a more accurate definition might characterize entrepreneurial as a state of the mind, which facilitates an environment for personal and organizational achievement.
What I see happening is people reach a point where they get frustrated enough that they just leave. And in some ways I look and I go, well, that's a viable option. Why not get some people together and go out and start my own advertising agency? And I just wonder what you'd have to say about going out on one's own to create something, or is it more important really to try to get that team that we have now in place and working?
Eric, that's a million-dollar question. And I hope I have something close to a million-dollar answer. First of all, I would say, and I'd counsel you, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm in the business of starting and building businesses and building teams. That's what I do for a living. But I have seen so many people shortchange their future by a random assumption, if you will, that the grass is greener on the other side of the corporate wall. It's not as green as it used to be over there. It's tougher over there than it used to be. It may be tougher where you're at than it used to be, too. But it ain't easy. My pragmatic recommendation is be sure you've got your bases covered in your own personal interest, because a lot of people are coming up dry. The opportunity more and more today is to be a little defensive as well as offensive. We all have to make some tough choices, and there are a lot of new businesses that are being formed by very capable former corporate people who want to be entrepreneurial. When I became an entrepreneur in 1977, I became an entrepreneur by choice. Many of the people becoming an entrepreneur today are becoming an entrepreneur by necessity, and that's the difference. So if you want to become an entrepreneur by choice, be sure that it's a choice that you've thoughtfully considered. It may well be the right idea, it could also be the wrong one. One of the things I like to say is to use the acronym PEARL, P-E-A-R-L, and that is persistence is to achievement as repetition is to learning. Persistence is to achievement as repetition is to learning. We don't learn by just running through things once. When we train people, invest in repetition, invest in telling them more than once. Persistence is to achievement as repetition is to learning. I think that's an important point.
Can you say that this, and this were the reasons for it when you're looking at it in hindsight, 20/20 hindsight, so to speak, to say that, well, because I made this particular move and took this particular risk, that was the right thing to do? I mean, it could have turned out wrong.
Yes, it could have turned out wrong, but I believe I have made some of those intersections correctly. You know, when we talk about achieving things important, we can compare ourselves to a missile leaving Cape Canaveral on a multi-million-mile mission. Multi-million miles, and it will burn about 90% of its fuel in the first 100 miles downrange. The missile overcomes gravity. Our gravity, our human gravity, is fear. And we have to apply a lot of mental fuel, mental energy, a lot of mental thrust to free ourselves from that gravity, the gravity of fear, so that we have energy and direction for the rest of the journey. Because once we get started, fear dissipates. Fear is front-loaded. Fear is there when we're getting started. It is seldom there when we're finishing. Mm-hmm. Everybody that we work with has fear. I think there's a tendency to say, oh gosh, I wish I was my boss, or I wish I was a CEO, or I wish I was the chairman, or I wish I was the president of the United States. They don't have fear. I'd like to get rid of my fear. Let me tell you something, everybody's got fear. Everybody has fear at whatever level they operate. Maybe the fears are different, but I want to communicate with you that, hey, fear is okay. We can control fear, and we should control fear. Primary fears of rejection, and the fear of failure, and the fear of commitment. All of those are important fears. We all have them. That's the message I want to share with you. And we cannot overcome them. We can merely control them. And so if you equate to the belief that success equals not having fear, you can forget it. Because there's fear in every person, regardless of their levels of success. The fears are different. The effective people work hard to control them, but understand that they're permanent and they cannot totally overcome them.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point, because I think mastery of fear, or overcoming it or controlling it, is essential. Mm-hmm. I mean, being brave is not the absence of fear. It's persevering in the face of your fear and overcoming it.
Yes. Persistence is powerful. Many people fall short in other areas and compensate for it with persistence. Persistence is to achievement as repetition is to learning. Effective salespeople know most successes occur on the fourth or fifth call. If they quit after just 2 or 3, they'll probably never make the sale. Regardless of talent, or your preparation, or your product knowledge, most of us will never achieve anything substantial without persistence. The temptation to give up too soon is strong. Like most sports, life is a game of inches, not feet or yards. Persistence plunges us forward in small, important, and measurable steps.
Effective risk-taking isn't gambling, it's calculation. We all have fear. We can control it, but don't expect to overcome it. Remember Pearl. Persistence is to achievement as repetition is to learning.
Let's talk about some firing line stuff, things that we can tuck in our briefcase and put to work tomorrow morning. I call them habit changes. The first one, reality isn't real, expectations are. Let's say that you folks promise your spouse you're going to be home at 7 o'clock tonight, and the 3 of you say 9 o'clock. And in reality, you all arrive home at 8 o'clock. Now, what's the outcome of that? The consequence of that is that, hey, your folks are not too happy because you're an hour late. Your spouse is very happy because you're an hour early. The reality is we all got home at the same time. So what do we do about that? We understand that it's not what is, but what's expected that governs the human relationship. If you make a promise, keep it. If you make a commitment, keep it. Don't make a commitment if you can't keep it. Now, there are times we know when we're going to default, when we know we're going to say things, create expectations that we can't keep. There's a remedy. If I say I'm going to have this report to you by 3 o'clock this afternoon and can't get it to you, I have to let you know by 3 o'clock, because that is a reason. I say, hey, I just can't get it, Susan, until 10 o'clock in the morning. Is that okay? Susan will probably say that's okay. But what if I call Susan the next morning and say, oh, by the way, I didn't quite get around to it? Then it's not a reason, it's an excuse. Reality isn't real. Expectations are. We make commitments to keep them. Don't make promises you don't keep. I have seen careers blown. I have seen organizations foul up and tumble on this one point alone, reality versus expectations. Another thought. What are your coworkers, your customers' most prized possession? What are your most prized possessions as individuals?
Reputation.
Reputation? Let's get a little more simple. That's a great one, Bob. But let's talk about your name. Each and every one of us has a name. In terms of self-esteem, the thing that becomes most important and of most consequence to a lot of people when we're talking with them is using their name. Let me make a suggestion. When you're talking with someone, mention their name as early in the conversation as possible and as frequently as possible, because indeed that is their most prized, their most personal possession. If you want to help others feel good about themselves and feel good about you, the opportunity, I believe, is to use their name frequently and consciously.
I've known about calling people by name forever, and I still don't do it enough. Thank you for reminding me.
The clue to your tomorrow rests in your willingness and ability to be different, to accept responsibility and opportunity to become your own style of achiever. Achievers are a breed apart. They mold their particular style of success around principles which are entrepreneurial. Now, you don't have to own the company or be the chief executive officer to be entrepreneurial. It's a word that refers to a state of mind, a way of thinking, not a task. Futuristic thinking will require courage and accountability and reform. 3 habits you need to develop for tomorrow.
Reality isn't real. Expectations are. When you make commitments, keep them. Use first names frequently when communicating.
I'd like each of you to think about what I believe is a really important question, and that is, what is the very best way to get promoted? Who'd like to tackle that one? Lotus?
I think that I would find out exactly what my leadership's goals are, my leader's goals are. I'd make them my goals, and I'd work so hard towards it that he'd figure if he had me up there with him, that he'd get there faster.
All right. Bob?
Well, I've been with my company for 30 years, and I've started off in the shops, and I think through hard work and dedication, that's how I got promoted to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. Susan?
I'm going to promote the person who works as hard or harder at getting along with everybody else in my office as they do at their job. Whatever.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Eric?
I think the best way to do it is just to consistently do the smaller things that are required of you in your daily duties as a person, but also to find a way to do something slightly differently, some creative edge that other people don't have. But I think the basis is just those details that need to be done every day.
Covering the basics.
Yeah.
How about you, Steve?
To exceed expectations and to make my boss look good.
Great idea. Joe?
Well, I think to look ahead and to find, actually to help create a niche for myself that no one else can fill except myself.
Becoming a specialist, your own little area of the world that's very important to you and to them. Well, folks, that's excellent feedback, and all of those are very, very thoughtful answers. Let me share one that I believe is true, that I've experienced many times in my own entrepreneurial career, and that is the best way of getting promoted is to be sure that you train somebody to take your place. We are very much about the business sometimes of being defensive in these areas. Hey, I don't want them to be too good. They are going to take my place. Well, that's at the point, isn't it? I can think of 3 or 4 instances in the last 15 years in my organizations where I have overlooked someone who was capable of taking the promotion and doing a good job, except I would have created a larger problem in the void I created than the void I was trying to fill. And so we really couldn't move the person out of the slot. And it became a problem for that person, became a problem for the organization. So it occurs to me that the very best way of looking out for yourself is in fact to look out for others, for your benefit and for theirs. There's a clear definition of teamwork. To succeed in this futuristic workplace, you must have a deep sense of mission. Do you have the courage to be your own person? Do you understand the role that your personal and professional accountability will play in your future and in the futuristic workplace? Are you willing to initiate and support reform in the way things are done and in the way decisions are made? Will your sense of mission be strong enough to assure your survival?
Achieving in the futuristic workplace requires we have the courage to be responsible for our habits and results. We are accountable for delivering the expectations we create. And we are reform-oriented in preparing for the changing opportunities sure to come our way.